Focus. Ideate. Innovate. Enable. Vivriti presents the Game Changers Summit.
Namaskar to each and every one of you present here. On behalf of the Vivrati Group, we'd like to welcome all of you to the first edition of the Game Changers Summit 2022. Vivrati was born 5 years ago with the aim to change the landscape of mid-market lending by enabling debt to hundreds of mid-market enterprises across the country. The Vivrati Group has built a successful franchise, navigating through very difficult times, including the demonetization, GST rollouts, and large corporate defaults, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic included. Over the years, ladies and gentlemen, the group has witnessed 100% year-on-year growth while maintaining rock-steady asset quality, and their 400 lenders and investors have backed them in achieving this. This gathering is not just a celebration of the last 5 years, but rather celebrating the game changers who have paved the way and have changed the game in their own inspiring way. To begin with, I'd like to call on stage Mr. Narayan Ramachandran, Independent Chairperson of Vivriti Asset Management, to share a few words and welcome the audience.
On behalf of board members Namrata Kaul, Anita Bilani, and CEO Vineet Sukumar, and the entire team at Vivriti, let me add my 2 cents of welcome to all of you. Let me tell you a little bit about Vivriti. It is the only specialized player in sort of mid-market performing credits at the moment, we believe. And this is its sort of main and sole focus of its activity. It seeks to bring together the supply and demand side of corporate debt, both listed and private, and in so doing, match supply and demand of credit. Vivriti today is about 6,000 crores assets under management in a short 5-year span. So in very simple terms, we are sort of the specialist fixed income alternative manager, broadly speaking, on one side as the NBFC, where we lend our own capital, and on the other side as the asset management firm, where we work as a specialist in intermediating this capital. So thank you once again, welcome, and we'll begin the evening.
Next up on the agenda, ladies and gentlemen, we have an exciting and enlightening panel discussion on the topic Emergence of Indian Entrepreneurship. Now, this session will be moderated by Ms. Nisha Podar, market editor and anchor, CNBC-TV18, and joining her on stage to share their thoughts are prominent entrepreneurs from various sections of businesses.
Now, let me first question Karthik about the emergence and the evolution of the promoters into founders, and how have you seen that journey in your own particular experience as an entrepreneur and as an investor?
We are a country of entrepreneurs, and everyone wants to start a business. The truth is that we've been entrepreneurs to a large extent out of by default, yes. Because we've not had enough jobs and everyone is a single family entrepreneur. That said, amongst people who have rich background in building or operating companies in large businesses, we've seen a significant shift in terms of how they view entrepreneurship as a credible option, a thing that's acceptable from a values and from a family perspective. Right. And as we've seen successes of first generation entrepreneurs potentially make it over the last 10 years, I would say that's in some ways the big surge that's happened. For people to genuinely feel about problems that they face and feel that they have the power to address them, yes. That confidence that they can go out and raise money, that's like truly remarkable. In some ways, this has been a result of the emergence of private equity or the funding market and the angel ecosystem, etc., over the last 10 years. But equally, we've seen just the growth of the market and us trying to become a middle-income country, us not trying to at least solve for the basic necessities and think about what the future can be.
Anurag, how do you see the new age entrepreneurs at this point?
The way I define it's probably the third stage of evolution in the current entrepreneurship era, which we've seen starting from 2006-07 when the first, startup companies got formed. Most of those entrepreneurs took very, very big calls because they were, more than capital was not there. More importantly, most of the talent was not going into that area. So they were the first one to dream big and, started building the first stage of, ideas and, solving for problems. Post, we saw the next stage came in 2014-15, which is the Geo era, when mobile became the distribution point. And, India is a very large country, and distribution has always been a big problem to solve for good products to reach to masses.
Yes.
And especially if you are looking for a venture-backed company, growth and scale is inbuilt into that.
Yes.
And so this was extremely important. And what we saw, some of the older companies maturing, but more importantly, the newer entrepreneurs coming straightway building for mobile as the distribution medium.
Yes.
And now what we see is the third stage where, of course, some of the earlier companies are mature, but what we are also seeing now, much more serious talent is getting into entrepreneurship, and they're looking at bigger problems to begin with itself. But that's how we have seen, evolution of, or at least the way I saw in last, 10, 12 years.
Chetan, with the Reva magic that you created, how much is, getting an idea much ahead of its time important for a founder?
It's good teams, it's good business idea, and the capital, and of course the timing. And today, 20 years ago, I believe it was a little too early when we started electric mobility. But today the timing is right? The way we think of what governments are doing, the kind of capital that's available, the technology readiness, where oil prices are. So it's a game changer. So my only thing for that is, yes, I was very early in the first stint, but that gave me a tremendous amount of learnings about what to do, not just in India, but globally. And so in many ways is helping me as the second stint as an entrepreneur to take those 20 years of learning when the timing is really right and leverage that in a much bigger way as we can look at it. So it's sometimes, yes, you're early sometimes when you start off, but today I think the timing is right.
Tell me about one, mantra you have as, as an entrepreneur, which keeps you going for so many years.
I see challenges as opportunities. And I found that if there's a technical challenge, overcoming it, we've created patents. There's been a business challenge, we've created a new model to do it. When governments removed subsidies from our business 20 years ago, we went global because of it. So in many ways, each of those challenges, looking at it from a point of view, an opportunity, has probably been an important way of how we've thought of the business and thought of a mantra, I would say.
So on that note, Chetan, thank you so much. Anurag, Karthik.
Thank you.
It was a riveting discussion. I enjoyed it, and lots of takeaways coming in from the panelists on how entrepreneurship has been fueled over the years in the country. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm truly excited and super happy to welcome the one and only Mithali Raj, ladies and gentlemen, former captain India Women's National Cricket Team. And to engage her in a candid conversation today, we've got a household name, somebody who brings about such engaging conversations, Mr. Gaurav Kapoor, GK.
While you were going through that journey, I'm sure there were a lot of times where you would have thought, all right, maybe I'm done now. I can't do this anymore. You still get up the next day and fight. But did you go through those days? Were there days when your head hit the pillow where you thought maybe that's it?
I don't think so. I've ever faced that. Maybe after the World Cup this year that I felt, it is time to hang the boots. Not in these 22, 23 years of international cricket. Of course, I had some ups and downs. The phases that as athletes we go through, the lack of form, that also very less, maybe a couple of times, fortunately, in such a long period. The very purpose of playing for India, working hard, and there's no guarantee that I will score runs. But I found purpose in the responsibility of playing for India, the responsibility of taking the challenge of the batting lineup of the Indian team for a very long time, and the faith of my teammates that when I'm there in the middle, they know that we still have a chance to win. So I think I've taken that role as a purpose to get up every day in the morning and give it my best shot.
As a captain, how important is it to, because you take decisions, and sometimes I'm sure you clash with some of the players as well. How important is it as a captain or a leader to then later kind of sometimes admit that, no, you were right, I was wrong?
It's not too hard if you have, because for me the fundamental rule when I'm making decisions is that, it has to sync or it has to go with the team's interest. That's the topmost priority for me. There are many times that a youngster would come up with a great idea, fresh idea, because the youngsters have this elasticity of spirit, I would feel that, because their slate is empty. They don't weigh their ideas or verify it. Whereas when we go through certain experiences, when we have to take decision, we think, we weigh it, the odds and the how much, what if it doesn't work, what are the circumstances, if it works, how it works. So sometimes to understand and learn and probably even give a ear to those ideas is a good thing. And for that, you, as a leader, you have to be very open for suggestions and keep the room open for them to be expressive. That also creates a very healthy environment in the dressing room.
Okay, well, that's it. I think that's all we have time for. Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause for the GOAT, Mithali Raj.
Vivriti presents the Game Changers Summit. Vivriti presents the Game Changers Summit.
It is now time to welcome on stage the founder and managing director of Vivriti Capital and Vivriti Asset Management, Mr. Vineet Sukumar.
I thought I would take a couple of minutes to take you through two examples of game changers and their own unique way of thinking that have personally inspired me. This is at the Oscars prior to World War II. It's nearly 100 years back. In 1934, the Walt Disney Company had possibly a staff of 200 people and was already a very successful short feature film company for animated films. And at that time, Walt Disney took on a big bet that he would make the first long animated feature film. People thought he was crazy and completely dissuaded him. It turned the company almost bankrupt. It took him as long to make this film as it took to make Bahubali. It took nearly 5 years. It took $1.5 million at that time, a princely sum of money. This film, by the end of 1938, became the highest grossing film of that year and earned $6.5 million. Can anybody see the picture and guess what that film should be? Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, that's right. An absolutely inspirational story of somebody who kind of really stuck to conviction, took huge risks, which had a massive payoff. The next picture is probably more familiar to those of us who are students of finance in the audience. In 2007, Warren Buffett entered into a bet with the entire hedge fund industry. He said that the index fund could deliver more returns than a portfolio of hedge funds over a 10-year period. And he bet $1 million against it, at that bet. A hedge fund manager took up the bet. While the bet was to go from 2007 to 17, in 2015, the hedge fund manager conceded defeat. This is the picture of the returns that ensured. Warren Buffett, by investing in a Vanguard fund, clocked 85% returns in gross. None of the 5 hedge funds that were there in the portfolio could even come close. The average was 22%. This just goes to show that when you approach the problem of investing absolutely bottoms up, right? I mean, hedge funds were the fad. Even now they continue to be the fad. But Warren Buffett said that if you're a manager and you're at 0.04% of fees, which is what Vanguard was charging, versus the hedge fund industry at 2% and 20% of carry, this is what would happen. And he was proven right over a decade. I think these are just kind of great examples to show, to inspire us on and possibly guide us in our way of thinking on how we must be bold, how we must take bets, how we must stick to conviction, how we must stick, think absolutely bottoms up. I think the future is coming up very, very fast, and it will take all of what we have to weather it.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to welcome our next speaker, an innovator, academician, environment activist, and an education reformist. Meet the founder of Students' Educational and Cultural Movement in Ladakh. And ladies and gentlemen, a revolutionary who has changed the game for a community. Please put your hands together as we welcome on stage none other than Mr. Sonam Wangchuk.
Growing up in a place like Ladakh, you learn to make the most amidst adversities. And that's what my story is. I learned that it's a different curriculum it takes to become a problem solver. The curriculum that it takes to become a problem solver are things like curiosity. Curiosity that comes loaded with every child is the secret of learning, not the textbooks, not the teachers. So curiosity is the first pillar of problem solving, even in a harsh place like Ladakh. But curiosity alone is not enough. It can be monkey curiosity, just to entertain yourself. To become a problem solver, you need more than that, and that is empathy. That is a feeling for others' pains and problems and wanting to solve it. Now, this you don't get from schools. From school, you get how to compete and how to give problems and how to step on others and compete and cutthroat compete. That's not empathy. This I learned more from my mother than any teachers or any school, because my mother was always concerned. She was not schooled, but highly educated in my terms. Anybody who's passing by would get things to eat, drink, and so on. And that made me learn to care about others' problems. Much later, I see that that's true for businesses. Businesses that really click for generations are those that actually solve a real problem. So even in business, empathy, if it is powered by, it's a business that really is loved and lasts for generations and is playing a role in society. The third pillar is the spirit of initiative. Not just empathy alone, but initiative to go out and do it. And again, that I, of course, had no schools to learn, but I learned it more from my father than any others. He would always be going out and doing it and not just sitting hand on hand. Whether it was a broken handle on the door or an unfair system in society, he would change it. And that, I think, is what finally makes things change. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll stop here now.
I'd like to invite on stage Ms. Anita Bilani, the Independent Director of Vivriti Capital, to please come up and address the gathering. Also introduce our keynote speaker for this evening.
Our keynote speaker, Mr. K.V. Kamath, I'm sure we are all waiting for, to hear him out. If I were to think about his story, this is the biggest game changer in the financial services industry. Taking a developmental financial institution and creating one of the biggest retail banks in the country, which is ICICI Bank, but not really stopping there. Also creating very large institutions in asset management and insurance. So it's, somebody who's always looking for this opportunity. And a stalwart like this is, so inspirational. And I think, there's no stopping somebody like Mr. Kamath, because he's still at it and he's still part of NAPFID. And I'm sure there are many more journeys and opportunities for him to conquer and inspire us. So, Mr. Kamath, please do come on stage and we'd love to hear from you.
When I became CEO of ICICI, the parent of the bank, I said, if we have to grow and we have to put a mainframe in the bank, we can't afford it. So my IT people said, well, then you basically can't run technology. I said, no, there are newer things happening, and let's take a bet on those. So we became adept at using technology because we had no choice. And we used newer technology, took a bet on it, and scored. I'm a great believer in theory of constraints, that you throw a constraint and you have to jump higher, you have no option. So we had a constraint. In the bank of 1999-2000, ICICI Bank had maybe 250 or 300 branches. I said, can we acquire? So there were a few acquisition targets, but they would give me another 250 branches, nothing more. So how do you grow? Technology. So what do? You put in ATMs, and everybody laughed at us, because we were getting licenses for only 50 new branches in a year. And the largest bank out there had 10,000 branches. I said, I don't have 200 years to live to become somewhere there with 10,000 branches. So you had to put out ATMs. And at a point in time, there were 50 ATMs. You said, we will put 1,000 ATMs. Well, I won't go into the challenges there. But that was rolled out. In the next 8 months, we rolled them out. And then, of course, we kept growing it. What I'm saying is the ability to take calculated risks on technology was there even then. People took it in a measured way. I think it is today available in much larger footprints, as it were, and you could do it at a much faster pace, and probably at a cost cheaper than what it was then, because all costs have disrupted. I will end by, maybe a slight note of caution on one subject. I think there is always going to be a challenge between value creation and valuation. Almost every platform that I have seen, and young people come to me, discuss, I have been impressed, enormously impressed. Platforms that I use, which all of you use probably in daily life, I'm enormously impressed. These are really innovators. These guys are disruptors, and they will mean a lot to India as we go along. Aspire for that 25 trillion economy and where you are in that economy. Align your value and valuations, and I'm sure you will be unstoppable. Thank you, Vinit. Thank you, the Vivriti team. Thank all of you.
I'd now like to invite on stage Ms. Namrata Kaul, the independent chairperson of Vivriti Capital, to please come up on stage and give us the closing remarks.
Whatever we have heard today has been inspiring. And to that extent, I think the summit has been successful in achieving what it set out to do. That is to constantly challenge ourselves and to aim for more. And that is exactly what we continue to do at Vivriti today. It is our belief that the market needs not one Vivriti, but many such Vivritis, and it's for all of us to pave the path to reach that goal.
Thank you all once again very much for being a part of the first ever edition of the Game Changers Summit 2022. This is a community that is certainly going to increase the GDP of the country and going to foster one another. And we hope to see you for many more sessions and, of course, the second edition as well.
Vivriti presents the Game Changers Summit. Focus, ideate, innovate, enable.